Quite often the question is asked from me, sort of, what should the parents be doing differently in sort of to give or sort of provide for the best and optimal environment for in terms of auditory development especially. And quite often what is asked is that what should I be playing to my children, and especially is there something I can do to make my kids grow smarter? I often simply reply that simply the fact that you're wondering on this topic is that you're already interested in the well-being of your child, and that is already quite promising in terms of future development. The issue is mostly that the baby and the fetus especially needs to develop also on its own. I mean, the fetus does have its own sleep-wake rhythm, and disturbing that is quite stressful for the fetus. And simply focusing on something which comes to you in a natural fashion, for example, singing to your bump, or then simply speaking to your bump in a natural environment, that is enough. That's more than enough. So the only thing I would advise against is sort of playing loud music to the fetus. The fetus is able to recognize some specific patterns in the sounds only if they coincide with, for example, the mom moving to the rhythm of the music. And then sort of the baby notices that it's the same thing happens both in terms of movement and in the auditory stream it's exposed to, and then it notices somehow that these things might be connected and this is something I should focus on. The most likely thing, however, is that the fetus is probably focusing on rhythm and most likely the intonation, mostly pitch, since we do know that those kind of features are the ones which the newborn babies are also focusing on. We are quite sure that there is a learning effect, considering that we've seen the same sort of a phenomenon on the prenatal environment affecting the postnatal environment in so many studies. In terms of sort of cognitive skills, most likely not. I mean, learning a specific type of a melody won't help your baby to get smarter later in life. But the baby could possibly be using these sort of learned melodies to recognize some sort of familiar features in the postnatal environment. And that is usually something that calms the baby. So if you sing a specific melody during pregnancy, then you sing the same melody in order to get your baby calmed down when he's fussy. That's probably something the baby recognizes, that's something that the baby can cling to and then soothe himself as well. And that's possibly the benefit for the baby. Usually what we think of pitch means simply sort of, if you think of a musical scale, then on the same sort of octave, A has a higher pitch than the C. So if I'm speaking high-pitched voice or low-pitched voice, this is sort of the features which are quite prevalent in PARENTESE, and sort of changes in the pitch signals to the baby that something relevant is changing in the auditory stream. So if I'm, for example, increasing my intonation towards the end of the sentence, then the baby notices that, hey, something relevant is happening as well within the sentence. And that makes sense. And in terms of intonation as well, we've sort of emphasized specific parts of the word. For example, we might be elongating our vowels, like doggy. If you want to sort of incorporate some sort of talking to your bump in your activities of daily life, then simply make it a natural part of your life. If you are, for example, making some food, feel free to sing to your fetus, or sing these nursery rhymes when it feels natural and sort of normal to you. Don't play anything too loud. I mean, if you are in a room and you're listening to music and you want your baby to hear it as well, simply the normal volume is good. It's good enough. I mean, you don't need to increase the volume at all. The fetus is going to hear it. And especially if you sing it yourself, then there's a direct route from your own mouth towards the fetus through your bones, through which the voice is carried over. So that's something I would suggest. And even if you want to incorporate your partner in providing some sort of auditory stimulation for the fetus, just normal discussion, normal distance from you is good enough. I would guess still that the largest benefit that the prenatal exposure has is sort of forming a bond with the parents and the unborn child. And the sort of the goodness or the security of that attachment is the most or the largest predictor of good outcome, also in terms of cognitive outcome. So if you care for your child, if you love your child, if your child has a sort of knows it's safe, it can devote much more of its time to exploration, to play, to sort of learning about the world instead of worrying about whether it's cared or not. And that usually promotes good development. What's always been fascinating me in sort of the fetal learning or early learning is that sort of even the fetuses and even the newborn infants have this amazing capability to learn so much. The question is mostly on what we're learning. I mean, the infants are sort of not predisposed to learning specific items or specific things. For example, you and me might be more focused on or predisposed to learning features of English, since we both speak it, but the babies have no predisposition of this kind. So they are sort of open for everything, and slowly during development they start to focus on the features which are in their native environment. And this shift from this universal learning to this sort of a culture-specific learning and this sort of a switch in learning abilities is extremely fascinating to me. One of the interesting studies which we are still focusing on is sort of the parallels between language and music. The first thing we need to wonder on what is language for the baby. I mean, we know that learning starts in the womb already, but the main question is this sort of a language learning? Are the sounds that the baby learns is the baby already processing them as language? And my answer to that would be that I'm not so sure about this. Language is usually something we use to communicate, and obviously whatever the baby is learning, they can't attach a meaning to it. They simply notice that it's a repeating thing and a constant feature in the auditory environment. But to actually call that language learning is in a way a bit far-fetched. Does the baby sort of understand that the language is somehow different from music? I don't think so. But nevertheless, I think the features or the specific sort of skills that the baby is in the future trying to use in order to discriminate different changes in language, for example, understanding different vowels or discriminating different vowels from each other, learning of those skills definitely begins in the womb.